Before you keep watching, answer me this. If a stranger offered you everything you ever wanted, and the only thing he asked for in return was your name, would you say yes? Somchi did. And by the time he understood what he'd lost, the city already knew his real name better than he did. This is the story of the boy who sold his shadow to the city. Stay till the end, because the last 5 minutes will change how you see this whole story. In the heart of the Nigerian countryside, where the harmattan dust settled on zinc roofs every December and the smell of roasting corn drifted from compound to compound at dusk, there was a village called Ijokok, the sitting hill, because it was said the village elders once sat an entire night on a hill to negotiate peace with the river spirit, and the hill never forgot the weight of that meeting. In this village lived a boy named Somchi. Somchi was not the poorest boy in Ijokok, but he was not far from it. His father had died when he was 9, crushed under a fallen iroko tree while clearing land for yam. His mother, Mama Adis, sold okra and dried fish in the market, waking before the cocks to grind pepper on a stone that had outlived 3 generations of her family. Somchi loved his mother, but he did not love his life. Every evening, after farm work, the village boys gathered under the old Udola tree to listen to Papa Ijoko, the village storyteller, a blind man whose eyes had turned white as cowries, but whose memory held every tale ever told in that village, and some tales no one else remembered at all. The city is not evil, Papa Ijoko would say, tapping his walking stick against the roots of the tree. But the city does not know your name. And a place that does not know your name will sell you your own name back, at a price. The boys would laugh. What did that even mean? The city had lights that never went out. The city had cars that moved on their own, well, almost. The city had phones that could show you the whole world in your palm. What did the village have? Dust. Yams. An old blind man talking about spirits and prices. Somchi laughed the loudest. But that night, walking home under a sky crowded with more stars than the city would ever let him see again, Somchi made a decision that would follow him for the rest of his life. He was going to Lagos. 3 weeks later, with 14,000 naira sewn into the lining of his only good trousers, money his mother didn't know was missing from the tin box under her bed, Somchi stood at the motor park in the nearest town, waiting for a bus that would take him 6 hours west, into the city that ate villages for breakfast. That was where he met the man. The man wore a white agbada so clean it seemed to glow even in the dusty afternoon light. He had no luggage. No phone. No sweat on his brow despite the heat that had every other traveler fanning themselves with folded newspapers. "You are going to the city," the man said. It was not a question. Somchi nodded, suspicious but too proud to show it. "How did you know?" "Every young man standing at this motor park with fire in his eyes and dust on his slippers is going to the city," the man said, smiling with teeth too white, too even. "The question is not if you're going. The question is, what will you give it when you arrive?" Somchi frowned. "Give it? I'm not giving the city anything. I'm going to take from it. Money. Opportunity. A better life." The man's smile widened. "Oh. A taker. I like takers. They always give the most in the end." Before Somchi could ask what that meant, the bus horn blared, and in the commotion of passengers and conductors shouting destinations, the man in white disappeared into the crowd, as if the crowd had simply absorbed him, the way sand absorbs water. Somchi told himself it meant nothing. Motor parks were full of strange people. He climbed onto the bus, found a window seat, and watched Ijokok's outskirts shrink behind him. He did not know that the man in white would be waiting for him in Lagos before the bus even arrived. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button now, because trust me, what happens to Somchi in the city is where this story turns from folktale into warning. Drop a fire in the comments if you already have a feeling about that man in white. Lagos swallowed Somchi the way a river swallows a stone thrown carelessly from a bridge, with barely a ripple, as if it had swallowed 1,000 stones before him and would swallow 1,000 more after. He slept on the floor of a cousin's one-room apartment in Ajigona for the first 2 months, sharing space with 4 other relatives who had also come to Boso. He learned quickly that the city did not care about his mother's okra farm, or Papa Ijuku stories, or the idolatry back home. The city only cared what you could do today, right now, to survive tonight. He worked as a bus conductor, shouting destinations until his throat bled dry. He worked loading trucks at Mile 12 Market until his back screamed. He sold recharge cards at traffic junctions, running between cars, breathing exhaust fumes thick enough to taste. And every night, exhausted, hungry, and further from his dream than the day he arrived, he thought of the man in white. What will you give it when you arrive? One evening, 7 months into his Lagos life, broke and desperate after being cheated out of 2 weeks' wages by a market ogre who simply refused to pay him, Somchi sat on the pavement near 3rd Mainland Bridge, watching the lagoon water catch the last orange light of sunset, and he wept. That was when the man in white sat down beside him. He had not aged a single day. His agbada was, impossibly, still spotless. You look tired, Somchi, the man said. Somchi's head snapped up. How do you know my? I know every name that enters this city hungry, the man said gently. It is my business to know. What are you? Somchi asked, and for the first time since leaving the village, he felt the old fear his ancestors had felt for things that walked and talked but did not belong entirely to this world. The man smiled that seemed to even smile. I am the city's oldest debt collector, he said. And tonight, I'm going to make you an offer that will change your life. All I ask in return is one small thing. What thing? Your name. Somchi almost laughed. My name. That's it. You want to buy my name? Not buy, the man corrected. Trade. You give me the name Somchi, the boy from Ijokok, the boy who sews his savings into trouser linings, the boy whose mother still lights a lamp for him every night hoping he'll walk through the door, and in exchange, I give this city a new name. A name with money behind it. A name with houses, and cars, and women who look at you like you were never dust at all. And what happens to me? The real me? The man shrugged, as if the question bored him. You'll still be here. Somewhere underneath. Every man who takes this deal is still somewhere underneath. The question is whether you can find your way back to him, once the new name has had its fill. Every instinct in Somchi's body, every story Papa Ijuku had ever told under the idolatry, screamed at him to refuse. A place that does not know your name will sell you your own name back at a price. He understood the warning now. He understood it too late, or perhaps exactly on time, because hunger is a strange clock, it makes very late things feel very urgent. He thought of his mother's tin box, now permanently empty because of him. He thought of the market ogre who cheated him without consequence. He thought of 7 months of concrete floors and empty stomachs. Fine, Somchi whispered. Take it. Take the name. The man in white smiled wider than Somchi had ever seen a human mouth smile, and for just one heartbeat, one single, terrible heartbeat, his eyes were not eyes at all, but 2 small, glowing coals, the color of a dying fire. Dawn, the man said. Welcome to the city, Chief Samchak. And just like that, Somchi was gone. In his place stood a man in a crisp white shirt he did not remember buying, with a phone buzzing in his pocket that he did not remember owning, and a driver waiting by a black SUV he did not remember hiring, all calling him by a name that felt, disturbingly, like it had always been his. Okay, if you've made it this far, you already know this story is about to take a hard turn. Smash that like button, it genuinely helps this channel bring you more folktales like this. Now let's see what 5 years of success actually cost him. 5 years passed like a single long night. Chief Samchak became known across Lagos. He owned 3 properties on the island. He drove cars imported from countries he'd never heard of as a boy. He was invited to weddings, burials, chieftaincy title ceremonies, and business dinners where men shook his hand a little too firmly, a little too long, as if checking that he was real. But something was wrong, and it grew worse every year. He could not remember his mother's face. He tried. God, he tried. He would sit in his marble-floored living room, surrounded by staff and imported furniture, and try to picture the woman who had ground pepper on a stone before dawn every day of his childhood, and there was nothing. A blank space shaped like a mother, with no features filled in. He could not remember the idolatry. He could not remember Papa Ijuku's voice, though something in him, some small, buried, drowning thing, remembered that the old man had warned him. Warned him about exactly this. Worse than the forgetting was the replacing. Where his mother's face should have been, there was now a board meeting. Where the idolatry should have stood, there was now a business deal that had made him 11 million naira in a single afternoon. The city had not just taken his memories, it had filled the empty spaces with itself, like water rushing into a cracked vessel. He was rich. He was successful. Everyone in Lagos knew his name. But it was not his name. And each morning, waking in his cold, enormous bed, alone despite the women who looked at him like he was never dust at all, Chief Samchak felt a hunger that no amount of money could touch, because it was not a hunger of the body. It was some chi, somewhere underneath, still starving. And then, on the 5th anniversary of the deal, though he didn't consciously know it was the anniversary, only that something in his chest felt tight and wrong that particular week, a letter arrived at his office. It was written in a shaking, uneven hand, on a torn page of exercise book. It said, "They tell me my son is a big man in Lagos now. I have waited 5 years by this lamp. If you see him, tell him his mother is dying, and she has forgotten what her own son's voice sounds like too, because grief does that to an old woman. Tell him, if he is still in there somewhere, that Ajoko is still sitting on its hill. Still waiting." It was signed, Mama Adis. Something cracked open in Chief Samchak's chest when he read that letter, a door he didn't know was there, swinging open on hinges rusted from 5 years of disuse. He remembered a stone. A grinding stone, worn smooth by a woman's hands. He remembered the smell, roasting corn at dusk. He remembered a tree, and an old blind man's voice, saying words he had laughed at as a boy, "The city does not know your name. And a place that does not know your name will sell you your own name back, at a price." He dropped the letter. His hands were shaking, and for the first time in 5 years, they felt like his hands. That night, Chief Samchak did not attend the business dinner scheduled in his name. Instead, he drove himself, no driver, no staff, 6 hours east, back toward a village he was no longer sure he could find, chasing a memory of dust and stars. He arrived at Ajokok just after midnight, and the village looked exactly as he'd left it, smaller than his 5-year-old memory of grandeur had made it, but somehow more real than anything in Lagos had ever felt. He found the compound. He found the tin box, still under the same bed, still empty from 5 years ago. And in the corner, on a mat, lay his mother, impossibly thin, impossibly small, a single kerosene lamp burning beside her exactly as the letter had said, exactly as she had promised every night for 5 years. "Mama," he whispered, and his voice cracked on a name he had not spoken aloud in half a decade. "Mama, it's Samchi." Her cloudy eyes opened slowly. For a long, terrible moment, she stared at the stranger in the expensive shirt kneeling beside her mat, and Samchi's heart nearly stopped. What if she doesn't know me either? What if the city took that from both of us? Then her cracked lips moved into the smallest, most exhausted smile he had ever seen. "You still smell like harmattan dust," she whispered. "Under all that cologne. My son. You came back." Samchi, and he insisted on that name now, refusing every chief and Sam that Lagos had tried to bury him under, stayed in Ajoko for 3 months, nursing his mother back to health with money that, for the first time, felt like it was actually his to give, because he was finally the one giving it. He went to see Papa Ijoko under the Udola tree. The old man was even older now, his white cowrie eyes clouded further by time, but his memory, as always, had lost nothing. You met a man in white at a motor park, Papa Ijoko said, before Somchi had spoken a single word. It was not a question. Somchi's breath caught. How did you? Because I met him too, boy. 40 years ago. And so did my father, and his father before him. The city has always had a debt collector. He does not create greed, he only offers a shortcut to men who already carry it, quietly, in their chest. The old man tapped his stick against the tree roots, the same rhythm Somchi remembered from childhood. The question was never whether the man in white was real. The question was always whether you would remember the way home. I almost didn't, Somchi admitted, his voice raw. Almost, Papa Ijoko repeated, is the whole story, boy. Every single tale I have ever told you, under this tree, was about the word almost. Almost lost. Almost forgotten. Almost too late. He smiled, gap-toothed and ancient. But almost is not never. Your mother's lamp burned for 5 years because she believed in your almost. Somchi returned to Lagos only once more, to sell every property, close every account, and walk away from Chief Samchak entirely, leaving behind a name that had never truly belonged to him. But here is the part of the story that villages still whisper about, generations later, under Udola trees not unlike the one in Ijoko. On his last night in Lagos, standing on 3rd Mainland Bridge exactly where he had wept 7 years before, Somchi saw the man in white one final time, leaning against the railing, a border still impossibly clean, smiling that same too-even smile. You're leaving, the man said. Most don't. Most stay Chief Samchak until the day they die, never even remembering there was a Somchi to miss. Why? Somchi asked. Why offer the deal at all, if you know most men lose themselves completely? The man in white looked out over the dark lagoon water for a long moment before answering. Because the city needs builders, he said quietly. Someone has to build the roads, the banks, the towers. Someone has to want it badly enough to trade everything. I don't force anyone's hand, Somchi. I only ever asked a question. You were the one who answered it. And then, just like at the motor park 7 years earlier, the crowd, thin as it was at that hour, seemed to simply absorb him, and he was gone. Somchi never saw the man in white again. But he never forgot the question either. What will you give it when you arrive? Somchi went home to Ijoko for good. He built a small business selling farm produce to the city he had once nearly lost himself inside, but this time, on his own terms, under his own name, visiting Lagos only as a trader, never again as a debtor. He married a village woman who had never once needed to see a black SUV to know he was a good man. He had 3 children, and every single evening, without fail, he sat them under the Udola tree beside an aging Papa Ijoko, and he told them this very story, the story you have just heard. Not as a warning against the city, but as a warning against forgetting. Because the city is not the villain in this tale. Ambition is not the villain either. The villain, the only villain, is the forgetting. The small, quiet moment when a man decides his name, his mother, his roots, and his tree are worth less than a shortcut. So, before you go, answer the question honestly, in the comments below. If the man in white sat down beside you tonight, what would you say? If this story hit you the way it's meant to, do 3 things right now. Subscribe, because next week's folktale might just be the one you needed most. Like this video, it costs nothing, and it tells me exactly which stories to tell next. Comment Ijoko Ke below if you'd follow Somchi's path back home. Until the next story, remember your name.